All right, the recording is started, and this is the June 29th, 2021 Rook Community Meeting. I think we've got a couple discussion topics that we added to the bottom here, but we can start on our milestones first, as usual. So Travis, I believe you've updated all this here for our latest patch releases, and there's nothing for 1.5, I believe.
Right. I don't think we need another release for that anytime soon, or at all, hopefully.
And then
1.6.
we are doing 1.6.7.
Right. So that one, well, we just did it last Thursday, so bi-weekly would be next week, but I think there's a couple of important fixes we want this week if we can, at least if we're ready. So one of them in the blocking column there is Blaine's working through with GPT partitions. Blaine, do you want to explain that one briefly?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you good, Blaine.
Yeah, I guess like the underlying issue is not really about GPT partitions, but it's about so I guess notably Ubuntu supports Atari partitions, which are very old. The last Atari system was made in 1992, but it still it still supports these Atari partitions, and like any kind of modern partition will have a header with a magic string that says I'm FAT32 or I'm MS-DOS or whatever. But Atari's version of that, to my understanding, is just 3 bytes, and so it's very easy for random information to appear as though it's an Atari partition if the kernel is built with Atari support. So we were seeing with like the switch to raw mode, we were seeing then the kernel is detecting that there is an Atari partition. And then when Rook goes to like run the provisioner again, it sees that there is a partition, ls block, and yeah, ls block and some versions of like block ID don't support Atari, just because it's so old. And then they see that it's empty because it doesn't have a partition type. It's assumed to be empty, and then we deploy an OSD on it, but there's already an OSD on the disk, and so we end up getting a full disk OSD and then a provision or a partition OSD. And then sometimes that partition also appears as an Atari partition. And so there can be kind of an arbitrarily long string of apparent partitions that have OSDs deployed on them. And it is, yeah, it's really bizarre. Ultimately, the solution we decided to go with is to only support GPT partitions, which is, I think, pretty safe. The only other kind of modern choice we have is to support GPT or MS-DOS. But GPT supports disks larger than like 2 terabytes or whatever it is. That, I mean, really, like there are so many modern hard disks that are larger than 2 terabytes that I don't know that anyone is going to be using anything other than GPT anyway. Yeah, so that like works around the Atari issue, because if the partition doesn't have a type that we can determine, then we don't deploy anything on it. It just means that if there are users who are used to just like creating partitions that are untyped, they will have to like make the GPT labels on those partitions first. And I have, yeah, hit a snag late yesterday with some of this volume validation, which doesn't want to install if there are GPT headers on a thing or on a partition. But I think that's something we will probably just ignore.
And as far as what's left for this, is it the CI is still complaining about the change?
I don't think it's the CI anymore. I updated our CI environment to create GPT headers on the partitions and to reload the partitions in the kernel. So I think now it is the issue we're hitting is the Ceph volume doesn't like GPT partitions either. It just wants them to be blank, I guess.
Yeah,
but this-
it's so annoying. Like they removed it. I remember actually when they removed it. So it's well, same as suggestion, I guess.
But the CI is passing now. I think it looks.
No, it won't be passing. That's the thing. We need another revision, I think, with this patch. We need something else.
Yeah.
And CI is like also it's CI, but it's super close to reality as well.
Mhm.
So it's not really our CI that is doing something that nobody's gonna ever do. No, it's really something that we're expecting people to do, but it is failing because of the volume.
Yeah, I think
Right.
the other option we have is to use parted to figure out if a partition is Atari. In my first iteration, I just looked to see, I looked at a disk and then tried to find out if it was a Atari using the tool that does support it, which is parted. And then from there, just ignore it if it is an Atari partition versus explicitly supporting GPT, because it sounds like based on Ceph volume's behavior and the behavior we currently have, Rook has up until now been expecting partitions to be empty and not have any labels or types associated. So it's just an empty partition devoid of any other information. I don't know if we would see Ceph volume raw mode doing any strange things if a partition has GPT headers. I assume it would just
No,
overwrite
because we no, we own that code in Ceph volume, so we don't do anything special with it.
I guess is that gonna make the disk smaller? Do we avoid those GPT partition sections?
Yeah, from a few bytes, I guess.
What if we take the discussion offline? I think at this point, I think the point is when this is fixed, I think we want to get a release out so that we stop creating these bad OSDs. But yeah, hopefully in the next couple of days it's resolved.
Is it clear for Blaine and Seb and Travis here about no longer using Ceph volume for the validation phase there? Is that everyone's pretty aligned on that one?
That's something we still have to discuss a little deeper,
Okay.
I think.
Right. I guess that doesn't. I didn't follow all of that because Ceph volume I think is important to validate our partitions or what we're doing. So
yeah, but it does very little. So let's keep it up. Let's keep this offline.
All right. Do you maybe we want to table that for right now and kind of get to the rest of the milestones and other agenda items, and then if we want to at the end we can come back and have more of a deeper discussion on the decision around Ceph volume.
That sounds good to me.
Cool. All right, but yeah, that sounds like a good fix to get in there and have. So the plan is to get that in 1.6. We've got it tracking it as blocking the release there too. So we'll continue making progress on that one. Thanks for that sounds like a bit of a journey there, Blaine. Thanks for taking us down that journey. That was interesting.
It's it is really the perfect storm of very weird things going on.
Cool. All right. Okay, and then 1.7 coming up as well too. about another month left on that one, it looks like. So who wants to go over some highlights, important things here, progress on the 1.7 with about a month out?
Well, I guess the dates proposal, first of all, I think we brought it up at the last meeting, but just since you were out, I'll cover that again. I think if we get the beta release out around July 21st and then shoot for the release on a week later on the 28th, that just seemed reasonable. Keep us on the cadence of about every quarter. I think our last release was what, early April 15th-ish. So that's just over 3 months, which seems fine. As far as the highlights, so I didn't get a chance to update the board this morning. I ended up having all sorts of meetings that were unexpected. Thanks, Seb. But yeah, what do we have in the board here? Let's see, CEF mirroring. Oh, there's a couple of fixes I think we're just waiting on the next CEF release for, 16.2.5, which hopefully will be any day now. And then we can get that CEF mirroring done. Is this the this is the 1.7 board? Okay, because I think that we were going to put that in the 1.6 board or project too. I think the main highlight on my mind is that we'll be done with Jenkins when we get 1.7. So there's we've got a couple of topics or bullets later in the agenda that we can come back to. And then feature wise in 1.7, I feel like there may not be a lot of huge new features, but I'm probably forgetting some too. Seb, what comes to your mind for features for 1.7? I think you're working on a couple of them.
Well, there is the cozy driver that we are
That's true.
hoping to start integrating. I think Jiffin is going to rework his initial PR, and we can go ahead and merge it soon. There's a lot of the
code,
the initial comment. Yeah, PR.
Right.
I think once that's there, we can start having an integration in Rook. At least all the heavy lifting and then deploying and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Kazi won't be ready until Kubernetes 1.22, like around the August timeframe. So we may pull it in. It may make sense to pull it in after 1.22 is released. So we'll
yeah, I guess we can still have this like experimental anyways, or just we can still integrate the code and not maybe activate it or just mark it as experimental, because this will actually really help for integration once we have like the foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or we'll probably have to activate it if your Kubernetes 1.22 or greater.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not so much 1.7, but yeah, really hoping to get CFS mirroring as well. Well, no, actually, it is 1.7. What am I saying? CFS mirroring is, it's actually in review. So yeah. This is a big highlight for 1.7. Just waiting for CEF 16.2.5 for this one.
Well, and most of that one was already in 1.6 as well, right? But it hasn't. We've been waiting
it's
for
like
the CEF updates.
Yeah, this one is like auto configuration of it. 1.6 was more like you can deploy the CFS mirror daemon, which later on we realized that wasn't really working because of some internal bugs for the CFS mirror. So yeah, definitely this one is the real like implementation, working end to end.
Right.
And yeah, hopefully key rotation for cluster encryption as well. I'm hoping to get this in 1.7. And there are a few patches related to disaster recovery with RBD mirroring and full mirroring that I will be, and Santosh will also be working on 417. So
Oh, and then Blaine, all of your work around dependencies, making sure we're blocking uninstall if you have dependencies installed. A bunch of that work is in the to-do column. Or
Yeah, yeah, I think it probably will also spill into 1.8. I don't think all of that's gonna be quite ready.
right. Or maybe 1.7 patches or whatever. But
Yeah, but potentially. I also think that's okay. I think we have the core, like we protect the Ceph cluster CR, which is kind of the most important thing to protect anyway.
Cool.
any other thoughts?
Right.
1.7. I think a lot of other little things going on, but
Yeah, that sounds good. And progress is being made on that. And we've kind of got a timeline set for when we'll be getting to the release and cutting release branches and stuff like that. So, okay, all that makes sense. Any other comments on milestones or upcoming releases? All right, let's move on then to the community topics section here. So our continued progress on no longer needing Jenkins.
right. And I guess Subham isn't here. He's been working on this with us, but yeah, basically the tag pipeline is about the last one we need to replace with the GitHub action, where it looks like you can trigger a GitHub action manually, which is exactly what we need to do, basically to go create the tag. And then, but that should be pretty straightforward. Other than that, then we just need to enable the GitHub actions to build and release from the release branch, which is already working in master. We'll just need to flip the switch basically for doing it in the release builds. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it. We're really close. That's the point. Any questions about the CI or Seb, any other
Yeah,
questions?
Travis, for the tag pipeline, you know, creating release branch and pushing a tag. Would it also cover scenarios where you don't need to create a release branch, like when you want to tag the latest patch, like 1.6.7, to run the same workflow, same action?
Right. Well, we've had the same tag pipeline in Jenkins that does that. If it doesn't exist, then it creates the branch.
Right. It skips creating. It doesn't always have to create the branch, right?
Right.
Okay. Cool.
So probably just keep that same behavior, or maybe we could just have a separate pipeline or action that creates the release branch, which you do once for release.
Yeah, I mean, in other projects I've seen, like they just use the GitHub UI to create a release branch. It's like a one-click thing. It's not really a special operation or complicated one. It's almost the same amount of automation as starting and running an action.
Right. Okay. Or even tagging. Maybe there's
That's a possibility.
a simple GitHub UI thing. But
yeah, you can always create a release, and when you create a release, then you get a tag out of it. So yeah, you could.
So, and this is literally the last thing that Jenkins is being used for, really?
well, there's the tag.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then on release branches, enabling all the actions.
Enabling the publish and promote, basically.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. That's amazing. That might, if there's no other questions on that, that might segue nicely into this whole Rook Jenkins account here.
Mm-hmm. The GitHub token update.
Yeah, it's so is Rook Jenkins that's only being used like for the Jenkins server to do operations with GitHub, right? There's not, is that being used in any other tools or any other locations that you were aware of?
Not that I know of. Yeah, where would it be used? Like, does that allow Jenkins to go update a hook that tells GitHub when the CI is done or things like that?
Or Yeah,
Or
or
access
do
to
like
the
write
GitHub.
operations like create tags and stuff like that, that, you know, you think you have to be
Oh, right,
authenticated
right.
to do.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
if
should be really
that's,
limited.
yeah, if it's only being used on the like within Jenkins is the only like originator of requests or operations that are using that account, then that's might be able to just sunset that account too and not really have it around. Like I would not do that immediately. I would keep it around for, you know, if you have any issues, you need to go back to Jenkins or anything like that. But don't see much of a need for it if we're no longer using Jenkins, if it's baked into the name there.
Right. Like the 1.6, as long as we're supporting 1.6 patches, we'll probably need Jenkins to keep running.
Mm.
But 1.7 and on, we shouldn't need Jenkins anymore. That's the goal. Yep. Or maybe we could also backport the actions all to 1.6 and be totally done with Jenkins.
Either way, we won't decommission or get rid of this account anytime, you know, in the next like week or two or anything like that. We'll keep it for, you know, at least a couple months, you know, after 1.7 and start doing patches on that and feeling good about everything. Okay, that sounds good to me. And then FASA, lovely FASA. Did we, Travis, you and I started a conversation. I forgot, maybe you were asking about, should we even keep using it? Like, do we need FASA security scanning? Is that part of the core infrastructure initiatives badge that we have, that we need to keep up to date and maintain that and stuff like that?
Well, I'm trying to remember, because I'm sure that like Chris or someone else in CNCF asked us to make sure we're running that, right? I don't remember the history exactly, but I'm pretty sure they wanted it. And it makes sense to have a passing license check, right? It's just a question of, well, this thing just gets so many false positives because it goes so deep into all the repos, which we pull in, but don't even reference really the things or use the code that it thinks we might be using. So we just have to add all of these exceptions or disable everything it finds. But then I haven't been able to get access yet to disable it on Rook, so it just shows up as red all the time.
Yeah, and Travis, can you refresh my memory on what the support people said the latest was? Like, was the account that I have that you were added as an admin to, that is not connected to, that's not the official one either? Or what is this, what is the latest on that?
Right, it hasn't changed for a couple of weeks, so I'm trying to remember. But I think, yeah, the thing you added me to, it's a Rook account, but it didn't seem to have access to the Rook GitHub repo. And I need to look again at their last response. Their support did respond, but I don't think it answered the problem, which is, well, how do I log in with an account that has access to update that Rook repo, the exceptions? Because every time, it's like it wants to force me to log in with my GitHub token. And okay, when I do that, then it just takes me to my private forks version of that FASA scan, which for a long time I'd been adding those exceptions or silencing those things. And I'm all, oh, it's green for me, but then
But it's not the
still red.
official
It's not the official
upstream?
fork, right?
Oh, geez.
And so, yeah, I feel like their support has responded a couple times. I need to get back to them and say, well, it's still not working. And then ultimately, I guess the question is, does it make sense to keep the badge if it's just always red? We don't want the badge if it's just red for a reason we don't think is good. So it would be nice to fix it, but if we just can't get access to that, then I feel like we should disable it.
And one thing that their support had said to me on a not for Rook was that like their Go based source code repository support was still being improved or built out better. So the like they recommend like doing like a manual scan like with their local FOSSA CLI tool to get started for a repo that like is able to just do direct dependencies, and as opposed to going through like the entire 20 something K dependency graph, and then slowing down and breaking the UI and all that sort of stuff. That's what they say to do. It doesn't sound like they haven't really improved much since then, if they're still having problems with like the dependency graph and managing that and sort of stuff like that. So it's just like, yeah, like there's a lot of issues with FOSSA that I think I haven't seen much improvement on in a long time.
Yeah. So I guess my thought was, if we can't resolve it by the time we meet with Chris and Amy next time, we could just bring up the question of, hey, do we have to keep supporting this thing or figure it out, or can we just remove it? Just get their input, I think.
What
Like,
do we have a sync up with them soon?
looks like it's on July 12th. That's the day you're
Oh, that's the day I'm
traveling.
traveling, so I probably won't be able to be there. If you could follow up on that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll plan on it.
Nice coincidence there. Sorry, I'm traveling. Okay, cool. Well, that sounds good. So that Blaine, you added this issue about is that to capture the discussion from earlier on the crazy Atari petitions, or is this to continue the discussion with volume and stuff?
It's primarily just to capture it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, so I think that's most everything on the agenda. If folks wanted to stick around to talk more about how we use volume, and if we can continue relying on it for validation or updates we want to make, etc., we continue brainstorming on that one. But otherwise, though, we can see if there's any other issues to talk about and adjourn. Do you all like Seb and Blaine, I think they're the main contributors there. Do you want to continue talking about the volume usage related to partition validation, that is?
Yeah, I have interest. I know it's also getting late for Seb, so I don't want to like push this too late.
Or we can discuss here or in adjourn and go somewhere else, or I don't mind.
Okay. I don't know if I have a strong preference. It might, I mean, it'll be pretty technical. It might be better just to.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it benefits that meeting.
Yeah.
Meeting.
All right, that sounds good. Then you guys can find each other on Slack or whatever and get that conversation going. Then sounds fine to me.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Are there any other items that folks wanted to bring up with the group here? Okay, sweet. All right. Well, thanks for everybody meeting today. We'll keep on working towards the 1.7 and then hopefully get the 1.6 out. Blaine and Seb will talk more about Atari fun times. And good to see everybody this week. Take care.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
By the way, I'll be
thanks.
offline next week, pretty much for PTO. So.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Have a good time, Travis.
Yeah. See ya.
All right.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
one. Bye.